I'm loose.
Good.
Hey, everybody, I'm Britton Buchanan, and the drive-in will never die. Yeah, so I went into the studio with my writing partner, Derek Furman, who also co-produced the song, one day, and I had just come back from Monsterpalooza, Son of Monsterpalooza in Burbank, California, where I live. And I was like, you know what? I'm tired of hearing all these same Christmas songs, everything. And, in about a month, it's going to be dominating the radio. And we never get any Halloween music on the radio. So let's try to write, a Halloween song that people will like and that is accessible and mainstream and everything. So that's where it started. I mean, I grew up with horror. I saw A Nightmare on Elm Street, Wes Craven, when I was 9 years old. I'd grown up before that watching the Travel Channel and True TV with my mom during the Halloween season, and they would always do these specials on like the houses where this was filmed, the Amityville Horror House. Look, they added the window. It doesn't actually look like all of that stuff. And you would always catch these glimpses of these monsters, these movie monsters, and it was so enthralling to me and so exciting to me, and you just had to piece together what these things were. And I finally convinced her to let me watch one, and it scared the crap out of me, and I became addicted to it. And at the time, all of those movies were up on YouTube for free for some reason, and I watched all of them, and it just started this thing, and it was downhill or uphill. It depends on which way you look at it ever since. And so I just kind of wanted to write about that.
Is that where you first discovered Joe Bob on YouTube?
Yeah, I discovered, all those old Monster Vision interviews with like Linnea Quigley coming on Monster Vision, or Linda Blair and Joe Bob, all of these things. That's where I discovered it. And then, it laid low on my radar until Shudder, did this marvelous revolution of Joe Bob and his shows. So when The Last Drive-In came, it was full speed ahead for me, and kind of re-devouring all that old material that I saw when I was really young, and having all this new material to digest now. It's been amazing. He's brilliant.
So you assembled quite a pantheon of horror icons for this video for October's Queen, the second single on your upcoming album. So, but yeah, you've got literally 24 of some of the biggest names in horror singing along with you on this track, so to speak. So tell me a little bit about how you composed the list and how you made it happen. I mean, this is short of a miracle, outside of
Right.
a monstrous horror convention.
Right. I found myself about a year ago, getting. I've always loved the genre, always been really into it, and then I would always, go like 6 months where I would watch nothing but horror films, and then, a couple months off, and then I would be back into it again. And I came into the circle of two of my best friends about a year and a half ago now, Kelly Kidd and Red Carter, who do paranormal nights out of their shop in South Pasadena, and we just, we our our worlds collided, and we re-energized each other in the genre. So we found ourselves going to the Egyptian theater and the Arrow and the New Art and the Chinese theater, and watching all these screenings with Q&As. And one night there was a premiere of this documentary called In Search of Darkness at the Egyptian Theater at Beyond Fest last year. And Caroline Williams was going to be on the panel, and I just commented on her Instagram post, looking forward to seeing you speak or whatever. And she came back and said, "Oh, come introduce yourself." So I think that she knew who I was from my time on The Voice, and I went and introduced myself, and we hit it off, and we became really quick friends, and she's one of my closest friends. And that kind of, with Caroline, kind of that started just me meeting all of these people, and I became really quick friends. Caroline, unfortunately, was on a drive-in circuit, so she couldn't. There wasn't enough time for her to be in the video. And then second, I met Linda Blair, who is one of my closest friends in the entire world. She is busy doing important work with her World Heart Foundation for Dogs, so she couldn't be in the video. But I just became friends with all of these people. I started an interview show of my own in July during the pandemic, and interviewed about 15 people, from Kane Hodder to Mick Garris to Michael Berryman to Linnea Quigley to Ari Mihailoff, all these people that ended up being in the video, Dee Wallace. And so I just found myself, in these people's orbits, and worked up the nerve to say, hey, would you want to do this? And most of all of them said yes. And then there was a bunch of folks that I didn't know as well. I have met Joe Bob briefly at the Egyptian Theater, but I don't know Joe Bob, and he said yes. Same for David Naughton and Lori Cardill and a lot of people like that in the video. So it was amazing to see people that I've never met in person, or never had any interaction with online either, want to be in the video and say yes. It's pretty amazing. I'm very ecstatic about it.
Yeah. So what are some of your recent favorites as far as horror films, some newer horror films?
Well, I know this one, from people that I've talked to, is kind of polarizing in terms of people loved it or hated it. But one of the last movies I saw in theaters before all the theaters closed was The Lodge, and it struck such a chord with me and the people that I saw it with, that we just sat there in silence and we didn't move. We didn't even speak to each other at the end of the movie, and just, watched the credits roll with our jaws dropped open and our eyes wide, and we were like, this movie is insane. So The Lodge is one of my recent favorites. Crawl, I really liked Crawl. I thought that was a great film. There's so many. I just watched Scare Me on Shudder, which I thought was fantabulous. I don't know if anybody's ever used that word to describe a horror film before. And yeah, just different, like, I feel like we've kind of seen a renaissance in horror, because it was a little dicey there for several years when we were in our remake craze, and there was a bunch of crazy stuff coming out that was like, this misses the mark for me. But over the last couple of years, I feel like we've seen a resurgence of really great horror films, really well-made horror films. Oh, Doctor Sleep. Doctor Sleep is probably my favorite recent horror film, because I'm such a Stephen King nerd, and the liberties that it took with the adaptation to kind of pin
exactly.
Put a flower on the grave of this Stanley Kubrick movie, which is one of my favorite films ever. But tying Jack Torrance's storyline with Danny's in that way, I thought was really brilliant. And so that's probably been my recent favorite. The director's cut is amazing. So
agreed.
I love that film.
An 8-year-old boy or girl comes up to you now and says they want to watch a horror movie. What's the horror movie you tell them to watch first?
That's a great question. I saw A Nightmare on Elm Street first, so I think that has to be my recommendation. I feel like, it's pretty terrifying, but it's pretty safe. There's no like crazy sex scenes. There's no crazy, well, there is a lot of gore, but there's no crazy gore. And I feel like it's really, that movie can really put a big impression on you when you're that young, and you have to go to sleep directly after it, and you don't know if you're going to wake up, you're going to see Freddy Krueger in your dreams. So that was my first, and it worked well for me. So I think I'd have to go with that one. I would recommend, to a young kid, which, I love this film. It's not necessarily horror, but it definitely works, because I just recommended it to someone who has young kids. But I love The Monster Squad, and I feel like that's such a good foray into horror for a young kid, because it's not really a horror film, but you have all these classic monsters. And so I would maybe start them with maybe give him a double feature if they can sit still that long and do the Monster Squad and the Nightmare on Elm Street.